Hi there, guys. I'm just going to check that we're on, and then we're going to get to reading this. Okay, so 3, 2, 1, let's go, let's look. Just have to click, make sure it says I'm live, and then, yeah, I can see. Woo! Awesome. Okay, so I figure I'll read like the first chapter, just because, I don't know, it's nice to have an audiobook and it's going to give you an intro to a little bit more. And since we saw that first picture of Kalu, I figure, yeah, why not just celebrate it with like a little bit of a reading here? Okay. I grew up in a village so small that it didn't have a name, and being an orphan without parents to fend for me, I didn't have a name either. They called me Sword Boy, not because I had a sword, but, but because my doppelganger did. Mean and cruel, he destroyed everything he touched. Every person he met cursed his name, and it became my name to wear. Our village blacksmith was a beautiful woman named Audria Sandstone. She spent her life trying to build a sword good enough for a warrior who might take her hand in marriage. It was a strong-looking sword, and it was capable of adapting to the will of its wielder. It was the symbol of all her love, of the efforts of all her lived years, until my doppelganger came, took the sword in his hands, and thrust it through her side. He didn't kill her. He simply wanted to make a point of refusing him what he wanted. I always liked her store, but I never dared approach it, as poor as I was, until I heard she was injured, and I wandered out the front of her store if she'd ever be well again. I wandered past her store each day waiting for the sign that she was back again, and then maybe I might buy a simple rusted junk sword from her as an excuse to lift her spirits. Yet on the day she returned to her shop, she saw me outside her store dreaming of the warrior I might be someday, and in a hysterical rage, she balled up all her courage into a fist and told me about the dream I had destroyed. Of course, it wasn't me. But ever after that, the town knew me as the sword boy, the kid who took Adria Sandstone's chance for a husband away from her, not only taking her prized sword, but leaving her with a scar on her waist that made her fearful of the day she might reveal herself to a would-be husband, a destroyer of life and hope, a person who laid plans of deepest betrayal. I grew up with that weight on my shoulders, a desperation to be loved, to be understood, to be at peace. But it was something I could never reach because whenever people looked at me, they saw him. I found my way though, and eventually I left that town, left that burden, and found true strength in myself. I became a king and learned the ways of magic from the joyous spirit Kaluche. She taught me many things. First and foremost, how to be a good man, then how to bring that forth as a king. I earned my knowledge of magic by bettering the realms I commanded, by the love I had for the people in each and every town, and yes, one day I met Sword Boy again as a mage. He had taken up allegiance with the cruel spirit Sodin, a force of darkness, and he came like a flood of evil upon the land, a force of magic and decay that no soldier was equipped to forestall. And so I gave up the title of my kingdom, handing them to a trusted friend, and I became the shield of the realm as I fought him back. And after the grandest battle our world had ever seen isolate him, I still remember the blood thick on my hands and intermingled with my own. It was a foul kind of blood, unnatural. It took hold of me and I was dragged to the underworld, but not before I dragged his cruel army along with us. We died upon the altar of the Sunstone. The easterly breeze took my soul to Kaluche one last time, and as I closed my eyes, I was Sword Boy no more. I was just me. Lost to the wildness of time, Death took me within her arms and whispered that I'd done what I could, that I could rest now and struggle no more. Kaluche shrieked the king's long silver beard, as he opened his eyes to the spiraling magic of the whirlwinds. Her crystal blue eyes held him tightly as tears streamed down her face. I cannot go where I cannot follow you where you go, she whispered with longing. But I will protect you for as long as I can. The winds blew like a storm around them, as light was stripped from the kinetic tendrils of magic that made up this realm between the known world and another. I don't want to let you go, she whispered again as darkness lashed at her shining wings. Kalu, he whispered, don't hold on too long. What I did, no. What we did, it was real, and it lives on in you. Hold on to it for me, and if there is a way, any way, I'll see you again. Kali pulled her arms tight to embrace him, but his body vanished into the cold and dark winds that surrounded her. Her stomach tightened and her whole body convulsed as she held back a scream. No, don't go, she sniffed as she pulled herself gently back away from the darkness and slipped from his view. All he could feel was the cold, sweeping tide of the winds as they carried him. The memory of Kalu held him together as he floated in a timeless place, a void of space and time, a world without memory or place or reason. He wasn't sure if he'd been there a moment, or if it had become an eternity when he felt an itching, as if small creatures were burrowing and weaving their little nests in what remained of his soul. Tug, tug, stitch. Tug, tug, stitch, stitch. Go away, he lashed out. He was tossed into a pool of water, and sensation exploded all around him. The thrumming sounds of a drum, the screaming roar of tidal waves crashing against rocks, the horrid screeching of a banshee. Ah! He tried to scream, but was muted by his lungs being incapable of breath. Glob filled his mouth, and he squirmed and kicked, a snake coiling around him, red everywhere. Thump, thump. He fought madly to gain control of the serpent as it swarmed about his legs and slid up towards his belly. Wait, he thought. It's burrowed into my belly. What kind of demon is this? Ah! No, not a demon. As his fingers smoothed over his belly, he realized he was floating, that the serpent only moved when he moved, and that the drum beat in a familiar rhythm. The scream wasn't a banshee, but a child playing. The crashing of waves wasn't a storming sea, but a stream gently playing with the shore-side stones. And the red wasn't blood, well, at least not blood that was bleeding anyway. It was light shining in from his mother as she basked in the sunlight. He reached with his hand to try to remember what it felt like. It had been so long since he had felt the last of those sweet golden rays. He closed his eyes and imagined himself standing in the sun, free from the darkness of the winds that had taken him from the world. As he basked in the dream of feeling the sunlight again, a question remained. Was it the world he had fought for? Would he see Kaluche again smiling down upon him? No, he couldn't bear to hope for that. No man, not even with her grace, could be that fortunate. Or more likely, he had drifted so far upon the ocean's currents that he had found new land. Surely if this was so, it had been Kalu's grace that held him together long enough to make the journey. Thank you, he whispered in his mind. With your help, I think I'm reborn. There will always be a time to run, a time to live, and a time to die. They were the words of my most trusted friend, and now king of Truden, Kogi. That was if Truden existed anymore. Growing up as an orphan, finally reaching the decaying city of Farage, there was no time to think about how to live, how to enjoy the taste of food, how to enjoy the simple pleasure of another breath. There was only time to run. The fractured stone slate of the alleyway grouched under my pad feet. I zoomed like a streak as the wind caught upon my hair. I wasn't untouchable. I wasn't cocky. I was alert. I was awake. I was scared. The whir of the raker's gun climbed in pitch before its gyro locked into the firing chamber. The bolt of lightning crackled and snapped from the barrel coils. Duck! Kogi screamed from the top of the broken remains of the retainer wall. I caught myself mid-scramble and dived into a pile of rotting potato peels as the acrid stench of overcooked oil clogged the alleyway and the zap of the raker's railgun scorched along behind me. Quick! Kogi said as he reached out his hand. The raker grunted as he pulled a peel from the gyro and recocked the coil winch. I spun and kicked off the corner wall, snatching onto Kogi's hand, kicking my feet up the wall as he pulled me over to safety. Have you got it? Yeah, still safe and sound, I said as I tapped my belt's leather bandolier. Quick, follow me, Kogi said as he led us through the maze of pipework on the outskirts of the merchant district. Generators from side to side formed a barricade between the world of those who could afford to purchase food and us, who had to make do with what we could scrounge from the sewers. I twitched happily in my cocoon, enjoying the freedom to remember my past life as my mother's heart beat in a melody in the background. Being carried around in a giant water balloon to visit forests, streams, and farmland wasn't so bad. And at the end of the day, the home was filled with a cozy hearth where the flames caressed me with their warmth. I couldn't tell much about my family, but I knew enough from reasoning things out. The child my mother was with during the day was likely a cousin of mine, or she looked after the child as someone important to the family somehow. Because the child was never with us around the hearth, all I could hear were the gentle rumbles of my father as he cuddled my mother and reassured her that things would be okay. I was glad that my parents seemed to be good people, real salt-of-the-earth types, who knew what it meant to stick together through the tough times and embrace it when times were good. I couldn't help but chuckle when my father tried out his best whispers on my mother and got swatted away. I was grateful she thought of me already. It was a kindness, as I was held in what felt like a hug that had grown stale weeks ago. I was impatient. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to know where my travels had taken me. Though, I suppose, having time to myself to muse about my life wasn't so bad. As Kogi would have said, since this isn't a time to run or the time to die, it's a time to live. So I try my best. The maid huddled the baby in cloth and smiled at his rosy cheeks. A swift kick from the child hid a glimpse of his member, but she saw enough to know. It's a boy, she said with a warm coo. The father rushed to her side and poked a finger at the little fella's reaching hand. Look, honey, we have a boy. Ooh, a boy. I'm so happy, she said before locking eyes with the tiny trooper. He reached out towards her and slapped her cheek with a celebratory waving of his hands. Of course they couldn't know he was rejoicing for his first moment of freedom, but it was obvious. It was a happy little bundle of life and love. Oh, she stammered in adoration. Nice to meet you, Leo. Leo's eyes shot open and stared directly at her. I'm Misha, your mother, honey bun. With no other way to smile bigger, he giggled and waved his fingers about like he might for a tavern bard. I think he likes it, the father chuckled. Yeah, it suits him, Misha cooed. What do you think, Madeline? The father said as stepping aside. I think he's the cutest thing I've ever seen. A lot of life in him, she chuckled. Could you fetch me some water? Misha asked between parched lips. Of course, Madeline said as she hurried to grab the ladle and a bucket. Thank you, Maddie. The father nodded as he took the ladle and helped Misha to a drink. Maddie's gentle tap on his shoulder signaled a warmth between them. Leo's eyes darted to the point of contact to decipher its meaning, and then rose to his father to take his measure. I think he's wondering who you are, Misha said. Nice to meet you, Leo. They call me Taz, but you can call me Pop. He squinted out a smile. So this is my family, Leo thought as he looked at each of them. Colucci's grace really had taken him further than he'd imagined possible. I'm Leo the Lion, the great and unconquerable. I've sailed the sea of widow's tears, and behold, I'm reborn, almighty! Almighty! He squeezed his fist tight, tears welling in the corners of his eyes as he rejoiced amidst the tiny sculptures hung above him in his cradle. As the hearth embers glow scattered shadows of them onto the wall, Leo turned towards his sleeping parents and sighed. His last parents, dying in youth. He felt it was best to try to keep a lid on his emotions, and to accept that while they were his parents now, they were also people he'd only just met, people with a past and a future that might run its course despite him. And as a child, there would be little he could likely change. The future was already in motion, their paths already set, unless, of course, he could remember the magic Kalu had taught him, and master it once more. Leo smiled when he remembered Kalu's first lesson. It was something he already knew already about life by the time he met her. If you wish to catch a tide, wait. If you wish to catch the wind, run. Kinda hard to do that when my legs are just these little stubs, KK, he remarked as staring down at a kick of his toes. But soon, I will, he smiled, sweetly closing his eyes. Ark! Ark! A scuffle at the windowsill sounded as the raven settled into its perch. Ah! Leo stared at the black feathers and reached out his hands to wave at the clever creature. Uba! he sounded in baby gibberish. Everything was new and fresh again. Even the birds in the sky were giants, and the presence they radiated was even more potent than as the quaint messengers they were in his previous life. He squinted his eyes as he looked at the leg of the bird. Around it was tied a piece of parchment. Hun, there's a message, Misha said as she put back a mushroom into her looped arm basket as coming through the door. A message? Taz scowled. Since when are we important enough to receive a bird? Ah! Ah! Birds sounded from the neighbor's cabin. There's one across the way, too, Misha continued. Taz rubbed a pang that had struck the back of his neck. I'm sorry, hon. I think this is a summons, he said as wincing. No, Misha said as dropping her basket of mushrooms. She stumbled backwards and held herself up against the wall. You can't go. We just had Leo. Taz tightened his eyes and took the parchment from the bird, his lips pulled back in agony as he peeled open one eye to read. Azalon has invaded. All men to arms, he said as climbing over each word. I'm so sorry, he pleaded to Misha, with tears streaming down his face. No, she whimpered. No, no, just stay, she whispered as she wobbled her head back and forth, refusing to believe it. Taz's gentle caress drew back her hair over her ear and stopped her eyes from searching from an invisible way out. I love you. I love Leo. And I will come home. I swear this. But I can't do it alone. I don't know how. You do. You're the bravest woman I've ever known. Braver than even me by a league. What about Leo? He'll need his father, she sniffed. Taz bit down on a bitter pill, cracking it between his molars. Leo will be braver than the both of us. I know it, Mish. He'll hold the world in his hands one day. I know it. Don't go. I know, he said as he huddled her in his arms and tucked her in tight amidst his sweaty palms and beating heart. Leo's gaze was stoic as he watched on. He couldn't understand what they were saying, but he knew what the events meant. His father was being called to war. Ah! The bird crowed at him another time before taking to the skies. 2 springs later. There's a time to run, there's a time to live, and a time to die. He cried out happily as he sprinted through the woodlands just outside his family's farmstead. His feet carried him like the wind as he dived over a fallen tree. Wait up! A call echoed through the trees. Madeline, who was struggling to keep up in her cumbersome maid's dress, choked out between breaths the curse. He has wings for legs. How am I supposed to keep up? Don't run too far, Leo. Leo! Oh, you're there, she gasped, half in shock, half in relief as he popped out from behind a tree waving a stick. How are you so nimble? Only 2 springs have passed, she said as shaking her head. Madness! A grin as bright as the sun shone out from him as he let down the stick and reached his hands up to greet Maddie. Sweeping him up, she cradled him close to her chest and waded out of the boggy ground of the woods, back into the wind of the fields that surrounded the family cabin. Leo enjoyed the gentle bounce of his weight against her waist, and amidst the shuffle of her arms, he took the opportunity to place his ear against her chest and grip about her chest playfully. He was careful not to stop in one place or have lurid intent lest his true identity be discovered, but he bounced his hands against her bounty as his kingly whims demanded. It was his cunning little ploy he played to catch Maddie's attention when she was fussing too much. She stopped suddenly to the last pat of his hand against where her nipple would have been if it weren't for her outfit. I swear you do this on purpose, she said with a crooked eyebrow. Love Maddie, he said between giggles, and threw his head into her chest. Ah, whatever, she said as she hurried back to the lodge. The sound of knife chopping against wooden block and the boil of the pot hit Leo before the savory scents did, and when he stopped to sniff, he smelled the special herbs that were native only to this world. They shined an iridescent blue and were dried in the sun before cracked under the knife handle and used. He running you ragged again, Misha chuckled. He's like the wind, one gust and he's off. I don't know how a child so young can run so fast. Aren't their legs meant to be, flabby and for show? Not my Leo, Misha said with a proud wink. He's got life in him, blessed by Anya herself. Yeah, Maddie said, waving her hand flippantly. I haven't time to talk of the gods after all, what do they ever do for us? They brought us Leo. No, Leo brought us Leo. His legs carried him here. I'm sure of it. Ha ha. Misha cocked back her head and wiped away a tear of laughter with the back of her wrist. You're always so sarcastic. It is like you think he's possessed. He is, she clamored as putting Leo into his seat. He always taunts me. It can't be a coincidence. It's like he knows just what buttons to press. Maddie, Leo said as reaching out for the cleavage of her blouse. Stop it, she said with a smirk. Aww, he pouted with his best puppy dog eyes. He just likes you is all. He wants your attention, Misha continued with a wise, self-effacing smirk. He never bops your boobs like a drunkard in the taverns, so it's easy for you to say. Misha wobbled the knife handle for Madeline to take over and picked up Leo. Leo, shush, shush, shush. She's only being mean because she likes you too. Maddie mock stabbed him with dark eyes before grinning at Leo's shocked little face hung over his mother's shoulder. The cart rocked side to side as bags of the farm crop rolled around in the back. Leo looked at women chatting on either side of him judgmentally, and then back at the loose crops. Didn't they know how to fix goods properly? What if the apples and tomatoes were bruised? Nyah, he said as squirming over the back to swat down a moving sack. Amateurs. Agriculture was the lifeblood of Truden. It was more important for all farmers to take care of the yield. What are you doing back there? Maddie scolded. But Leo wouldn't relent. Oh, he's all right, Misha echoed. We forgot to lash the bags down. No, he's just climbing over everything like always. Nah, he's just being a man of the house while his father's away, aren't you? She said as easing the cart to a stop. Love you, Mama, he said, greeting her with open arms as she opened the back of the cart and pulled out the lashings of twine stuffed between one of the bags. Aw, Leo, love you too, buddy, Misha said as double tasking between a hug and tying up the bags for the journey. As the cart jostled towards the town, the morning sun stood above it. Leo noted the spires of smoke coming from chimneys of houses within the elevated segment of the town. The stone walls fortified that part of the city center, and he reasoned that it was where the notable citizens' houses were. He also noted the town was situated about a mile from the farm in the east. Crucial knowledge for many reasons if his family were ever to be injured and he had to go for help. His guardian angels, as he liked to think of them, the two gorgeous women either side of him, sometimes spoke of magic as if it was common knowledge. They didn't reveal anything of its nature, even when he pried, but it seemed that in this world, magic wasn't as rare as in Truden. It wasn't gifted to people who were exemplars of a particular virtue. It was instead a guarded secret out of reach of the peasant folk, or at least that was how it sounded. Is there magic in town? Leo asked with wide eyes. Oh no. Well, we'll see, honey. Why don't you like talking about magic? Leo said as pulling on Madeline's sleeve. Because the users are nothing more than pirates, she scowled. Pirate? Arr! She said as scrunching up her face and pulled her finger into a hook in front of him. Leo almost fell back into his mother's lap from the suddenness of it. Don't worry, hon, Misha said as rubbing his head. It's not as scary as all that. There's just a history between the nobles who use it and us normal folk who don't know how. Why don't they share? Wouldn't the world be better? I don't know. It's anyone's guess why, and I think they all have their own reasons. Horseshit. Excuse me for cursing, but those bastards like to strut about knowing we depend on them, ignorant of the fact that they need us more, lest they dirty their porcelain hands and pick shit. Maddie! What? I said excuse me, but seriously. They could help us, but they won't because they're above it all. Transcendent and busied by the work of it, as they say, she said, shaking her head in mock etiquette. Don't get the spirits angry, Leo asked. That's a strange wording. Okay, that needs to be changed. Spirits? Maddie craned her neck back towards him. And who told you anything about spirits? You must have rambled something about them when you had one too many cups of wine, Misha squinted playfully. And he was taking advantage, no doubt. I probably tried to summon up the spirits to stop him pestering me. Ah, Misha said as she cuddled Leo in to cover his ears. Juggling between that and the reins, she soon let him loose with a tussle of his hair. You'll see one, I'm sure, Misha continued. They are the ones with crests on their waist belts. It's like a pass to a wing of one of the libraries where they learn. Yeah, and the color gem signals how stuck up they are. Whatever you do, don't talk to one with a diamond. Stick to those with black or maybe purple. If those guys are having a good day, they can be alright. But only sometimes. Maddie wagged her finger. What are all the colors? Leo asked. Starts with black, who they call mutes, I think. Then purple, like the early night sky. Then blue, green, orange, yellow. Then white, I think? What about red? Leo prodded further. And indigo and magenta. Aren't there 10 stages? What? How do you. Misha turned around dumbstruck. How do you know how to count? Who told you about those fancy colors? Leo froze on the spot, his cheeks flushing red. Crap. Maybe I said too much, but I really want to know. Madeline pulled her into his lap and smiled down at him goofily, the evil in her eyes more apparent than ever before. See, I told you he was possessed. I see you. The neighs and blusses of the horses from the outskirts of town sounded as their cart pulled onto a stone path. Oh, hush, Misha said as she pulled the reins to steady the horses. Leo pulled himself up from Madeline's lap, making sure to bump into her blouse on the way up, and rested his hand on her side cleavage as he stared at the town as it came into view. A church bell was the highest point far away on the furthest hill. Surrounding it was a large stone wall. No doubt it was for the nobility and magic users. The rest of the town sprawled out on the surrounding smaller hills, all centering a plaza amidst them. The central roads carved through gullies led around each part of town, and only it was wide enough for horses and carts. All others, except the road to the fortifications, were small cemented cobblestone, edged by ankle-high grass. The thatched house roofs belied a form of industry, or at least a common town craft, as only the doorways and window placements of the houses differed from one to another. The houses were not spaced in direct rows, but appeared to have been aligned initially with curved ropes that sloped with the hillsides. Each house had a window facing east and west, even if it popped out of the roof like a periscope. This was doubtless to catch the rising and setting sun. And the doors pointed out to the road, mostly. Small perches lay on the window sills, presumably for ravens, and though they seemed to be made of wood only a couple seasons old, likely from the town marshals, by the quick and dirty way they were nailed in. Windows were made of wooden shutters made of thin bark strips raked off trees in the surrounding woods and straightened under heat and press. Most were open to allow in the breeze, though one that caught Leo's eye at the top of one of the hills was closed as a maid hurriedly swept dust and small olive-shaped leaves carried by the wind. They fluttered down around him like confetti from the direction of a gigantic fern tree with a rounded top in the central plaza. The sunlight glistened through its leaves as the cool breeze wound through the street carrying the mess along with it. Trodden deep into the road by hooves of the other carriages, it seemed a common occurrence that didn't only occur with the seasons. Leo narrowed his eyes. What's with that tree? It's the ever-autumn, Misha said as she pulled them around the corner and brought the plaza into view. Its market stalls flourishing with colorful ribbons and flashy woven fabrics to highlight stalls, and lists of what could be found in them. They say it's touched by magic at its root, that if you cut a branch, it just grows right back, though it's forbidden. Why is it forbidden? It's better not to stir the waters of magic, lest what dwells there has a problem with it, Madeline. Madeline answered. As they got closer to the stalls, Leo noticed that none of the goods themselves were on display, but they were stored in crates at the back of stalls, still sitting on carts. I guess they're worried about pickpockets and padfoots, Leo mused to himself. There was little other reason to not brandish your goods openly. Misha nodded to Madeline, who in turn got out to speak to one of the market stall merchants. Discussing things amongst themselves, they came to a deal and Madeline waved Misha over. Leo, however, had other things in mind. As he saw the flash of a purple gemstone between strides of a caped man in the crowd, vanishing in an instant, he zigged and zagged through the crowd, and at the moment before collision reached out his hand. Thud! "Oh my, didn't see you there, lad," the elderly man said as he readjusted his cloak. "And who might you be, then?" Leo looked up at him defiantly, attempting to assess the man's character by mean mugging him. "Oh, you're a lively one, aren't you?" the man said as he stood up to his full height. "Sorry," Misha laughed nervously. "So sorry. He's a curious boy and likes to run. He really likes the Ever Autumn, I think." "Oh, yes. Splendid, isn't it?" "Yes, sire." "Oh, you needn't worry about formalities, my dear. Not with me, at any rate. I like to think of myself as one of the common folk, you know." "Surely our work is beyond you. Toiling in the soil isn't the work of one as such as yourself." "Hmm, I suppose you're right," the man said as stroking his beard and looking down at Leo. "Though, I like I can I like to think I can connect with the plight of the everyman, as they say." "Of course," Misha laughed nervously. "We'll be off then," she continued, pulling Leo tight beside her. Her eyes widened as if to say, "Are you kidding me? Not now, Leo." Though she didn't have to say it, Leo kept quiet and tucked himself in a little ball up in the cart, staring nervously out at the ever-autumn tree, fumbling with something in his hand. "I have to learn. Without magic, I'm too young to protect the family." Well, I hope you enjoyed that chapter and the drawing of Carly. But that's the first chapter of the book, Secrets of Mana. And yeah, I hope you had fun. And yeah, I'm kind of happy to release the draft at some point on a website, probably Royal Road or something. But yeah, let me know if you're interested. I'll do more audios of this and stuff. But the big thing of this channel is obviously to get to developing manga as quickly and as rapidly as possible and make it good, and also just to eventually create something that's really entertaining, really immersive, and really nice. So hope you enjoyed that, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow-ish.